Well, hi everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee here on the Joe Chaffee Weather Show on this Monday, the 6th of May, 2019. It was scheduled to start at 8 o'clock, but I got everything finished up a little early, so it gives us an extra 10 minutes of time. So I hope everybody had a good weekend. I wound up not doing any live streams over the weekend. I figured that the weather, at least in my neck of the woods, was so downright miserable, especially for Sunday, that you really didn't need me to tell you that. And it was a good time to just kind of lay back, and relax. And of course, I know there's a whole lot of banter continuing to go on about the Derby and what happened on Saturday. Everybody has their view of things. I've been a fan of the horse racing game ever since I was about 17 years old. So I kind of have I have a long history in it, and it's not even so much for the betting. I really do admire some of these the horses and some of the great horses that go back. From Secretariat to Seattle Slew and Affirmed, to having seen those 3 Triple Crowns and then all the great champions of the 80s and 90s, Cigar, Personal Ensign, Sunday Silence, Easy Goer, and on and on and on. So I do know a little bit about the game. My initial impression was the horse didn't change the outcome, so I kind of would like to give him the benefit of the doubt. And then when I looked at the shots and looked what could have been an absolute disaster with regards to the horses behind them when he came out a little bit on the 3-path, and then hearing Bill Mott, the trainer of the Country Home or Country House, I forgot which one it was, the horse that was second and placed first. And he's a trainer that I've followed over the years and have a lot of respect for. And he made a very valid point. If this was a regular Tuesday at any park in a cheap maiden claiming race, the horse would have been taken down. So when I heard him say that, I kind of figured. I know he had some skin in the game here with this horse being second, but it was what it was. It's very sad, and I know it's controversial, but what can you do? All right, so actually what you can do is wait 2 weeks, and then it's on to the Preakness. All right, so we've got a few things going on, and I think what I'm going to do is, so this way I stay organized, I want to talk a little bit about the overall pattern, and then we'll look at what's going on currently and take it from there. So we'll start off with, I'm going to start off with the upper air right now and bring that front and center. We're going to start with the paint box. Okay, hang on 1 second, folks. Whoops. You can tell I'm out of sync right now. There we go. Okay, so as we left last week, of course, we were talking about this, this blocky pattern that we have, and that continues today as we take a look at the upper air, and it stands out pretty well. If you've been on here on a regular basis, you kind of know what to look for at this stage of the game. And it's up here in Greenland and over toward the shores of Labrador. You've got this big upper high. And remember, everything in the atmosphere wants to move west to east in kind of a normalized flow. And you see how the height lines here from the Pacific and running into the Pacific Northwest and across southern Canada, they kind of have this general flow from west to east. But that upper high has displaced everything much further to the south, and as a result, you've got the jet stream running pretty far south of where it normally would be for this time of year. This time of year, it has a tendency, it wants to pull up northward and start heading up into Canada. And with the jet stream, of course, displaced so far to the south, the result is that we've got this energy that comes in from the west and kind of rolls along. At the same time, in this flow that you see from Canada here, of course, you're getting air masses coming down from Canada, going into eastern Canada. I saw a report the other day that Montreal right now is experiencing one of its coldest 3 or 4 week periods that it's for this time of year that it's ever seen, because of this very cool flow. And of course that cool air, weight of the cool air wants to bleed southward, and we keep seeing these highs that just sort of press down in the east and bleed that cold air into the northern part of the mid-Atlantic states. At least that's where the boundary was last week. And that sets up a lovely little battle zone, warm air trying to come up, but it comes up through Texas and it pushes up into the southeast and through the Ohio and Tennessee Valley. So you wind up with this frontal boundary between the two air masses, and from there you wind up with potential for storms and severe weather and all sorts of shenanigans. And also with the fact that everything wants to move so very slowly, you have problems here with respect to weather systems, getting in there, and it takes you forever to get them out of the way. Now, as we go forward through this week, a few things are going to be changing in that upper air. And as we let me get rid of this, and we're going to put up the upper air GFS map for Sunday. This is for Sunday evening. One of the things that you'll notice is that the upper high is now a lot weaker than what it was. It's still there, but it's in a much more of a weakened state there, moving into along the shores of Labrador. You're starting to also see a big change out in the west, and this is important too, because we've had this trough in the west. The flow actually splits, and you get a ridging that builds up in the Pacific Northwest. So that's very important with that ridge in the west, because now you're going to wind up driving a trough into the east, and this is setting up for next weekend. And in addition, you've got all this Pacific energy that continues to roll along. So with the block still there, but in a much more weakened state, plus the fact that you're going to have this ridge that's going to pop up in the west, that's going to lead to a tendency for a trough to want to park itself into the eastern part of the United States. And as we take a look through much of next week, and I'm just going to jump ahead to about day 8 or 9, you still have whether it specifically looks like this, but the idea that you're still going to wind up with troughing in the east. And by the way, at this point, you got another little bit of a blocking high that tries to pop up again. Not a strong one, but it is there. But the point is that with generally higher pressures north of 60 degrees north and heading up toward the Arctic, you're continuing to see a very strong overactive jet down into the U.S. And one of the things I think we're going to have to concern ourselves with going forward is, while there might be a little bit more movement with these cold, deep troughs coming into the east at a time of year where things want to warm up and warm up reflexively in a hurry, you're going to run the risk of potentially having some severe weather outbreaks along the way, along with other stuff that's going to be going on. So that at least sets up, I think, where we're ultimately going with regards to the upper air pattern in the next week to 10 days. So I'm going to put the window up for a rest for a moment, and now we'll start to transition over to the current weather situation. So let me just hide this for a second. We're going to come back to it in a minute. And let's start with what's happening now tonight with regards to severe weather, because we do have a little bit of thunderstorm activity going on in some places. And here's the Storm Prediction Center's view. Large area of slight risk in the Central Plains, and it's added an area of enhanced risk where we have a working tornado watch and a working severe thunderstorm watch. This is as of 8 o'clock Eastern time. So if you're watching this on a replay during the early morning hours, or if you happen to pull the video up tomorrow morning, please bear in mind that this is dated. This is from 8 p.m. Eastern time on the 6th of May. So be sure you check for the latest forecast by going to your local National Weather Service office weather forecast page, and you can find that by going to weather.gov. So everything seems to be concentrated here, weather-wise, in the Central Plains states tonight. And we have a relatively... actually, the radar is not overly busy at the moment. I want to just get, which I forgot to do, but let me pull up SPC's forecast page, because we do have severe weather going forward for the next 4 days to pay attention to. And by the way, remember, I said this many times, when SPC starts putting risk areas up in their day 4 and day 4 to day 8 time frame, which is their version of the long range, you want to pay attention. So that's a hint of what I'm about to show you. So here we go. So this is this is what's happening right now, and for Tuesday, that risk area backs off a little bit, but it still remains pretty active in the Central Plains, and then back down through northwest and a good chunk of western Texas. You've got a pretty large area of marginal risk, but you have also an equally large area of slight risk, and a not too shabby looking enhanced risk that is setting up for Tuesday. For Wednesday, the area shifts a little bit further to the east. Now, bear in mind, we had a busy week in this area of the country last week, severe weather-wise. So it looks like it's going to be a repeat performance. A big area of slight risk for Wednesday, and a pretty large area of enhanced risk. And this would include Dallas, Fort Worth, Oklahoma City, and Tulsa, sitting in that slight risk area. And as I said, with the long range on their day 4, which you don't see too often, but when you do see it in this time frame, you want to pay attention. So this is going to be for Thursday into Friday morning, a large area of 15%, and 15% is what is viewed as a slight risk of severe weather. We don't have much. They had predictability too low for days 5, 6, 7, and 8, but that day 4 area, I think, is something that we should pay attention to. So here's the radar tonight. You got a fairly nice looking little line there of storms up in northeast Kansas, moving southeastward with some very strong cells embedded there. Looks like some rain moving out of South Dakota and into southern Minnesota. They're not quite warm sectored there, of course, and you have some storms building up in parts of West Texas. Looks like some right over Amarillo as of 8:03, and we've got some showers and storms going on in eastern Colorado and parts of southeast Wyoming. So fairly active this weather this evening. It'll probably get a bit more active in the next few hours. Very quiet, by the way, in the east, up and down from New England all the way into North Florida. But we do have showers and storms moving off the Florida east coast. Looks like south of Daytona down to about just north of Miami or around Fort Lauderdale, moving out to the east. Okay, so what's happening on the surface map tonight? Well, you've all gotten used to these frontal boundaries, and of course you can see yesterday's low is now not particularly deep. It's 1,001 low, sitting well offshore, and we're getting this little bit of a break here in the east today, and dry weather, nice dew points, temperatures into the 80s all the way down into... You have 80s pushing up into South Carolina, Georgia, and Alabama. The dew points aren't too bad. They're mostly in the mid-50s, so it's pretty comfortable. You start to get into those higher dew points into the 60s, in the mid and upper 60s along the Texas coast, and you've got 60-plus dew points shooting all the way up through Oklahoma and into Kansas. And, of course, you've got this frontal boundary here that lies through Colorado, across Kansas, through Missouri, and this weak cold front that is extending from Illinois through Indiana and then on up through southern Michigan and just to the west of the St. Lawrence Valley. So that front's going to be important because that sets the table up for what's coming down the pike with regards to the weather in the east. All right, so we've set up the long range, and we've kind of looked at the super short range now. So let's take a look at where all this is going to be taking us going forward. Now, in the east, the first thing is that we have another weather front coming into the east that is going to stall out. If you look at the upper air, and here it is. Okay, so if we look closely at the upper air going into Tuesday into Wednesday, one of the things you'll notice is, well, two things. First off, you have this short wave that's moving across southern Canada. So you see that area of blue kind of shifts eastward. So that represents the push that is the cold front. The problem is that once that short wave moves eastward, a ridge starts to build in the east. So this is where the surface front is only going to be able to get so far to the south, and then it's going to stall out, probably across northern Virginia and through the Delmarva Peninsula on Wednesday. And while all of this is happening, of course, you've got this energy that's out in the west, in the southwest, that's going to get kicked eventually up into the Great Lakes as we head toward the end of the week, and then that swings eastward to take us into the weekend. So the front coming down stalls, and Mr. Onshore Flow starts all over again. So ahead of that tomorrow, we will warm up through the 70s, probably see some 80-degree readings as far north as, say, central New Jersey, southeastern PA. Maybe a shower or thunderstorm with that front. It doesn't really look all that impressive. And, of course, at this point now, you're seeing that wet energy in the southwest, in the trough, with a low that develops there in northeast New Mexico, northwest Texas, and all the weather that goes with it Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. So it's no shocker here. You got a pretty good inflow from the southeast off the Gulf of Mexico and heading up into the plains, and a fairly solid frontal boundary that's setting up against the height of the northeast, and also some cooler air that's up northwest of that low center. So a fairly good battle zone for severe weather for Tuesday. Notice a little bit of snow and rain mix in the Rockies and on up into parts of Wyoming and Montana. And that low will eventually come out and head toward the lakes. Meanwhile, here in the east, the front goes through and it stalls out. And when we head toward Wednesday evening, you're beginning to see east and southeast isobars from New York City on southward. I think for Wednesday, there's going to be some dry air coming down through New England and upstate New York. The cloud line may wind up just south of New York City, so those areas north of that might wind up seeing at least a partly sunny start to the day before we go back into the soup. And I think Wednesday night and Thursday into Thursday night, the warm front sets up to our south, and this is where we're going to be socked in eastern Pennsylvania to through southern New England and eventually up further north than that, with a wind off the ocean, temperatures in a lot of places not out of the 50s. And of course, here we are going into Thursday. You can see some rough weather breaking out through parts of Arkansas and northeastern Texas. And of course, this is all part of that risk area that we saw from SPC for Thursday into Friday, for Wednesday night, Thursday, and then Thursday into Friday. The low heads up towards the Great Lakes, which makes total sense. You'll notice in the east there's a warm front that's kind of pinched in there across Virginia to the Delmarva Peninsula. There'll be some warm frontal rain that will come in later Thursday night into Friday morning. Always the question for the Northeast, how far north does this warm front get? It looks like it wants to push up into southern New England. The cold front comes by, and by the time we get to Saturday morning, weather conditions improve. Now we're going into Mother's Day, okay, which is oh so important. Father's Day, dads don't really care, because I think for Father's Day, at least for me, it was, I don't want anything, just sort of leave me alone, let me have the day to do what I want by myself. But, I have, as an old joke with me, I've said for many, many years, every day for Father's Day, I've been going to Belmont Park and betting the races, and for the last 20 years, and this year I may actually get to go. It's always been my view that that's how I wanted to spend Father's Day, and somehow it never did come to pass. But that, such as it is, that is life. not complaining too loudly. But here's the problem now for Sunday. Remember, the block is weakening. The blocking high is weakening at this point, but the ridge is building in the west. Trough is shifting into the east. We get a break on Saturday, but then the upper low sitting near James Bay swings around with another trough for Mother's Day, which puts Mother's Day in jeopardy. And that trough kind of hangs there in the east with more energy coming around as the week goes on. So we're basically trading patterns here in a sense, and both ends of it are not good, because now if we're going to one where you're having this blocking high, setting things up with onshore flow and lows to the west with struggling warm fronts, and now you're sort of trading that off with a ridge in the west and a trough in the east. And the trough in the east is it in a position where it's lined up near 80 degrees or 85 degrees west, where you start to get these weather systems coming through on a regular basis because they're being driven by this upper low and trough that's in the eastern part of the United States. That's the thing. The pattern's different, but in terms of the day-to-day weather, it could still be fairly problematic. Now, in the longer haul, the GFS wants to kind of pull things out and get us into a nice ridge toward the end of the month. But as always, I would be really cautious here with regards to coming to any kind of long-range conclusion, if only because of the fact that the GFS model in particular, has been routinely breaking down this upper high way too fast. According to the GFS, it should have broken down about a week or so ago as the month began, and that never happened. It's still there, and it's still hanging on. And typically in the spring, blocks are very slow to get out of the way. They in the wintertime, they're volatile. On the models, we've seen many times how the models show blocking and it never happens. Well, in the springtime, it's kind of the opposite. When the blocking does show up, it takes something really strong to come along and break it down. So with regards to this coming weekend, I think Saturday looks pretty good for my area, eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England. The bottom part of that front is going to stall out across the Gulf states, which makes it a bit problematic. Now you've got this energy swinging around and a bit of a wave that comes up from the old front from Friday that stalls, and you get this low that forms off the Carolinas on the GFS, and this would suggest that we'd probably get into some rain here, although it holds it off until Sunday evening and takes it into Monday morning. And then by Monday afternoon, weather conditions improve. Whether it works out that way or not in terms of timing, I don't know. I can tell you that the European today, as we take a look at that, same idea with regards to its upper air. It is a little bit stronger. There's your upper low by Saturday over James Bay, and now you've got this stronger short wave near Lake Winnipeg that it dives down into Ohio and western Pennsylvania and moves it eastward. This is a bit more problematic because you're going to have a surface low that's further south, and it starts out further to the west. Instead of being down in the Gulf states, it's a little bit further northwest of there, and this creates issues. We can only show you the surface, but here's your surface low on the European for Sunday morning. High to the north, weak high to the north, but onshore flow, low in western Tennessee. The isobars are pointed straight east toward the Virginia coast, so there's where your warm front lies. And by Monday morning, you've got a surface low, a not too shabby looking surface low on the European sitting off the Delmarva Peninsula with east to northeast winds, and pretty much a repeat performance of what we saw yesterday, only maybe push it back to later Sunday night and Monday, and then the low winds up going northeast from there into the Gulf of Maine. It's a pattern that I know you winter weather lovers would have loved to have seen during the winter months, and we barely saw it. If we got these lows that developed to the south, we know what happened with a lot of them. There was nothing to force them to climb up the east coast because of the lack of storm activity out in the Atlantic, so they all pretty much shot out straight east-northeast to the south of of eastern PA to southern New England. And when they did gain amplitude, it was due to a strong Pacific jet, and as a result, those lows wound up tracking up or west of the Appalachians, which for snow lovers was no good either. So you get the general idea here, folks. It's still a busy-looking pattern going forward, and we're going to probably be doing a bit of maneuvering in terms of the forecast as we try to figure out, just exactly how this whole thing is going to evolve for this coming weekend. Now, with respect to rainfall, one of the interesting stats that came out, I think for New York City, we mentioned last week how New York City saw at least a measurable rainfall for something like 20 out of the last 22 days. When you look at the total rainfall amounts that have occurred this spring, if we include yesterday's, the rainfall amounts in the areas that cover eastern PA to southern New England, for the most part, are near or only a little bit above average, believe it or not. It seems like it has rained a lot, but what's happened is we've had a lot of cloudy days, and we've had a lot of days where we've basically had less than a quarter of an inch or less than a tenth of an inch, as opposed to having event after event where we're putting down 1 to 2 inches of rain. So you would think that with all the rain opportunities, that the rain numbers would actually be much higher, but they're only running a little bit above average. Now here's WPC's forecast for this week, the next 7 days. So this takes us through next Monday. And big rains of 5 inches plus, East Texas, Louisiana, southern Arkansas, in through much of the Gulf states. You've got several inches or more extending into parts of Alabama and on up into northwest Georgia, and then northward into north central Arkansas. You also have an area of heavy rains from that they're forecasting from Kansas northeastward into the western lakes. And as far as the east is concerned, the rainfall amounts are on the order of the next 7 days of between 3/4 of an inch to an inch, with a few little smatterings there of an inch and a half in a couple of small areas. But in terms of overall, so let's say an inch to an inch and a half over the next 7 days. I think a good chunk of that's going to come probably, we're going to get a good chunk of that on Friday, perhaps, and then more as we go later Sunday night into Monday. That event might wind up being more just like yesterday's, where I know by me, we rained during the day, but it was actually more, it was mostly light rain during the daytime. The bulk of the rain came during Sunday evening. In total, I had about an inch of rain, but during the daytime, it was miserable, very light rain for the most part. At times, it felt like it was almost stopping, and then at other times, it would pick up a bit. But we didn't have any kind of torrential downpours, and I'm not seeing right now a situation where that is at a risk here with regards to these systems going forward. Although, of course, if it gets convective, you never know, particularly on Friday with the warm front. Whoever's in that warm sector might have some convective rains to deal with that could wind up being locally heavy. So I think that pretty much sums up where our weather is going pattern-wise. The lake levels on Grand Lake in northeast Oklahoma have risen significantly in the past 2 weeks due to heavy rains and storms. We've been getting the Neo show. I hope I said that right. And spring rivers are running fast. Erica Baker, welcome aboard. Thank you for the commentary. I would just also, I think I remember from Okie AG, who's one of our regulars here, that last year the problem was the opposite, that it was fairly bone dry. So I guess the rainfall, at least getting it back to a certain sense of regularity, is a good thing. It's Pamela Lee. One of the things about the persistent moisture, it all has gotten to soak in, and everything around me is blooming nicely and very green, and quite nice with regards to how the spring blooms are behaving. I got a beautiful robin's nest. I'm going to try and see if I can discreetly shoot a video from the inside of my house, nesting just outside my front window. And I was we were worried yesterday that the rains might have driven the female away, but I surmised that the female was buried very, very low inside the nest to protect the eggs. And sure enough, this morning that was the case, because I saw her running back and forth, getting stuff and moving around in the nest and taking care of things with the responding to the beautiful weather and the bright sunlight that was out there. Chuck Cardillo, always a pleasure. Robert Brown, Charlie Baker, Timothy Veltman, Johnny Quest, Anthony Orr, Scott Briller, I know was on earlier. I'm not sure if he's still on or not. Jason Barry, Alfred Phillips, on up on the north slope of Alaska, getting almost to 24 hours of daylight for you, Alfred. So one of my friends was asking me yesterday, how do you get used to that? On both sides, having daylight all the time. And then in the wintertime having 24 hours of darkness. I guess I don't know how you get used to that. Martha Gunter, nice to see you on board tonight. Anthony Orr is here too. Chris Alley, nice to see everybody. Jason Schaefer, James NASCAR fan. I think I got everybody. Oh, Trevor McKelvey, nice to see you on board. And T-Bear, nice to see you. Joining us. Patrick McGill, I haven't seen you on here in a while. Nice to see you tonight. Paul Roman. Good to have the regulars here. Okay, so here is, let me just give you a heads up with regards to what's going on this week, because I am going to be traveling for Wednesday night and a good chunk of Thursday. So I am not 100% sure after Wednesday what my live schedule is going to be. I will be doing lives, but I'm not 100% sure in terms of the time. So just bear that in mind. I could pop up I'm going to have to do these new live streams late this week and next week whenever the opportunity permits. So you might see lives come up at some odd times rather than at the regular time. So just bear that in mind. I'm going to be heading down to Georgia at the end of the week for about 6 days. So just bear with me in terms of the schedule. I will try to do the live streams at the regular time, but some days. I'm not going to be able to pull that off. We'll see what happens. I'll try. At least I'll pre-schedule everything, so this way and you can arrange your video viewing time accordingly, or you can always watch it on a replay. David Schwartz, I think you'll be fine on Saturday as far as planting your garden. You can go ahead with it. I don't see any problems with planting for Saturday. I think Saturday is going to be probably the better of the 2 weekend days, assuming that front moves out Friday night and gets out of the way, and I think it will. You should be all right. And the air behind it coming in for Saturday is not really all that cool. Plus, we're almost to the middle of the month of May, so you're down near the coast, and I'm thinking. And also into the closer to the warmer urban centers. So I'm thinking you have no frost worries if in the odd event that we get some sort of weird push of late spring chilly air coming down. All right. So thanks very much for being here, folks. By the way, you can use the Amazon link that is on. The descriptor to this live stream or the descriptor to this video. If you're doing your Mother's Day shopping, you can do it via my link on Amazon. Amazon doesn't charge you anything extra for using it. Just search and shop. You don't have to buy what's on there, but it's a great way to support my videos and to support my app and everything else. The link is up there now. We are a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates Program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for us to earn fees by linking to Amazon.com and its affiliated sites. And for those of you who are interested in a more weather-intensive experience on a regular basis, there is my weather platform on Patreon. It is just $2 a month, and that goes a long way to getting me a couple of extra cigars to enjoy myself in my downtime, whenever that happens to be. And don't forget, folks, if you haven't already, you can download my weather app, which works for all mobile devices. Let me put the link up for that. And it doesn't matter where you are, even though the stuff that I write for the app is focused for mainly northern New Jersey, New York City, Long Island, southern Connecticut, and the lower Hudson Valley. You can pull up your local weather conditions and your local forecast. Plus, I have the Zoom radar feature on there, which allows you to not only pull up the radar where you live, but you can also plot temperatures and wind, severe weather warnings, storm reports, and some other fun things. So that's absolutely free. I would just ask that you consider joining Patreon as a way of supporting the app, but there's certainly no obligation. And I do have an app that update that's going to be coming out hopefully in the next several weeks. And if not then, certainly before hurricane season really gets underway in a big way. The app update will, one of the things we're going to add to it is the fact that you won't have to put in your location every time. It will know where you are, and it will default to current conditions and your forecast for your local area automatically, and the radar will also default automatically to your location, so you don't have to keep putting it in every single time. And there'll be a few other updates and additions that I will add to that, so you can find that on Google Play or on the App Store. The link is up there on the chat. I believe I did put it up, and if not, if you can't see it, just go to Google Play or to the App Store and just search Meteorologist Joe Chaffee. You can see it right over there in terms of how to spell it, and download it to your mobile device and enjoy. I think we have a Joe and Joe weather show planned for Facebook tonight at 9:25. So do join us on my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Chaffee. If you don't have Facebook, not to worry. If we do the show, it'll be uploaded to YouTube, and hopefully I'll have it there by 10 o'clock Eastern Time. Have a great night, everybody. We'll either see you later or we'll see you tomorrow.